Welcome to Celebrating Act 2. Celebrating Act 2 is the user manual for the second half of your life.
Welcome back to Celebrating Act 2 with our special guest, John Mariani. Welcome, John.
Good to be back.
John, I am, as you know, not a big wine drinker, but a wine aficionado. I know what I like. Let me put it that way. I like dry red wine. And I wanted to share with you this. This is a wine that we've pretty much, we don't drink a lot, but we like it. Forgive me for trying to find the label. It's Robert Mondavi. It's a private selection. It says it's aged in bourbon barrels. I have no idea what that does for it. And it's a Cabernet Sauvignon 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not a lot of information compared to some of the French and Italian wines, the estate bottled wines that I see. So this is pretty easy to tell what I'm getting.
Yeah,
But the question is,
you did bring up a question there about the bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
All red wines, most red wines that take any age, are aged in oak barrels, which are made specifically for the purpose. Usually, there's a combination of new oak and old oak, and meaning that you get brand new barrels, and that imparts a certain kind of flavor. And older barrels, which have been used before, will also have a taming effect on things. Putting them in bourbon barrels is, you're never going to notice the difference. It's just one of those things, because every wine label is in fact an advertisement. Oh, we do this in bourbon barrels, so it may taste a little like bourbon to you. Isn't that swell? Or add some alcohol because of beer. No, none of that is true. Things like special selections. First of all, Robert Mondavi is a very good winery. It's no longer owned by the Mondavi family. Hasn't been for years, but they do produce a very good line of I don't know what you paid for that. Somewhere under $20, $20, something like that. They're very good at that level, and I don't know what special selection means, but any big winery will have several labels of Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay or whatever, and they get cheaper and cheaper in price. And it's not a dead giveaway, but the less that's on the label or on the back label, because there's lots to read in the back label there. The less that's on the label, the lesser the wine is likely to be in terms of quality, and the cheaper it's likely to be. That's not there are some labels that are very, very minimal for California wines because they're artistic, but if you turn them over on the back, they'll have all the same information you just read to me.
Right. Now, this does have more information on the back. It says limited release Cabernet, blended, blah, blah, blah. But the real point I wanted to make was that this is nowhere near as complicated as some of the European labels, the French wines, the Italian wines, which are estate bottled and Grand Cuvée. And what the hell does that all mean? That's what I want to know.
And they're printed in French and Italian and German.
Get that. Why would that be? I don't know.
I can't imagine myself. No.
So help us interpret labels.
Okay, let's look at some very good wines, and very good wines tend to, again, advertise how wonderfully good we are by what we stick on the label. So, for instance, Romani Conti. Romani Conti is a Burgundy wine from the region of Burgundy. And they produce two kinds of wines, basically. They produce Chardonnay and they produce Pinot Noir. They don't make Cabernet Sauvignon there. So they don't even put it on the label that this is a Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, unless it's a very low-level Burgundy wine. So Romani Conti is as tip-top as you could possibly get. It's called, in fact, as you can see, a Grand Cru, a great growth appellation. That's a formal legal appellation. There's only a handful of wines in Burgundy that get that appellation. This bottle, by the way, that we're looking at from 2004, as you can see, année means year, the year 2004, is probably, you couldn't get it for less than $1,200, $15 per bottle, which is amazing. So going down, so you have Romani Conti proudly on the label, no pictures or anything, and it says appellation Romani Conti Contrôlé, means a controlled appellation by the wine laws of France and Burgundy that this really is, no kidding, this is really coming from Romani Conti. Okay, and you just spent $1,200. You kind of like to know that. Okay, then it says récolte, which implies a quality of a Burgundy or Champagne label, and it means it comes from estate-grown grapes, meaning they didn't buy grapes from any place else in France or even from Burgundy. All the grapes that went into this wine come from our estate, so that's a further indication of premium quality. Then it says below that the bouteille 00414. That bouteille means bottle number. So they only make a certain number, and you've got number 414 out of the whole batch, which is nice to know. And then you got some signatures there. I mean that the guys who run the place and own the place put their signatures on it, guaranteeing it. That's on there, like baked bean jars and Heinz and stuff. And then mise en bouteille au domaine at the bottom there means put in the bottle at the domain. Now you say, well, why is that unusual? Because in other parts of France, Italy, every place else, they may in fact buy bulk wine and could be bottled somewhere else or put in the bottle somewhere else, shipped over to the winery. They slap their label on it and says, this is Burgundy wine from the Côte d'Or, the Côte de Nuit. What this is indicating is that this was put in the bottle by the guys whose names are above you there. So it's telling you a lot of information very, very proudly, and it rings true, of course.
Do you have some other examples of unusual labels, or at least details that might differ from this one?
Well, as I said, Romani Conti is a Burgundy, and where they make Pinot Noir. And over in Bordeaux, they don't make any Pinot Noir. If they're making a red wine, they make it from red grapes, predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, and there's Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, some other smaller amounts that go into what is predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon. Very, very, very rarely will you ever see 100% Cabernet Sauvignon Bordeaux wine. In California, they do that all the time, 100% Cabernet, which changes the character of the wine. Okay, so there, as opposed to Burgundy, where many owners could own a certain estate, or even merchants called négociants might own a piece of an estate. In Bordeaux, they are owned and made in one specific estate called a chateau. And the picture on this bottle is of the estate, Chateau Margaux. It's a big, beautiful yellow mansion, beautifully landscaped. And Chateau Margaux means the castle, or the chateau of Margaux, from that section of France, which is called Margaux. And there are many wines, there are many Margaux wines, because many wines come out of Margaux, but this is telling you, no, this is Chateau Margaux. So this is coming only from our great estate. It's a 1982 vintage, and it's telling you Premier Grand Cru Classe 1855. What that means is Premier Grand Cru, premier first-rate Grand Cru, classified in 1855. Without getting into too much history, back in 1855, they needed a classification of French wines. They thought it would be good, and the merchants put it together. And they found that consistently, year after year, certain wines were obviously better quality than other wines. So they took all the wines in Bordeaux, all the chateaux, and they ranked them in 1855. And still to this day, Chateau Margaux has a Premier Grand Cru classification, as it did, 150 years ago, 130 years ago, something like that. So that's nice to know. And it does say, as with the Burgundy bottle, mise en bouteille au chateau. This was all of it put in a bottle in the chateau. So it's not that difficult to understand. Obviously, it says France. That's nice to know. The appellation is Margaux. It's controlled, which means they can only make a certain amount of this wine. You're only allowed to make, let's say, 8,000 to 9,000 bottles of it, because they don't want it to be diluted to keep its quality high. The Société Civile, civil society of farm society of Chateau Margaux, and the proprietor is in Margaux. So a lot of repetitive stuff on that. But all you have to know if you walk into a store is to see the name Chateau Margaux and Grand Van, and then the vintage, and that's all you have to know, because this, like the Romani Conti and Burgundy, is going to be a great quality wine every single year.
John, are Italian wine labels any different?
Yes, they are considerably different. This is this has a lot. This is from Vittorio Frappato DOC. Well, they do pronounce it DOC, but I'll tell you what it means in a moment. But let's go up the top there. Now this says imbottigliato all'origine. It's the same as the French call mise en bouteille. It means it bottled at its origin. This is the estate name, Valle dell'Acate, which is a valley, okay, of the Acate. And it's a cooperative. Now this means that even though it comes and was put in the bottle in that estate or that region, let's say, a cooperative is number of different wineries and growers who would contribute their wine to a central location where the wine would then be made, blended, and put into the bottle. And then it says produced in Italy, which is nice to know, like produced in France. Now there's a nice little picture of the zone where it comes from. You see that there? That's down in Sicily there. And then it says Vittorio Frappato DOC. Well, DOC is actually DOC, which, as you see below that, is Denominazione di Origine Controllata, which is, as with the French wines, it's saying Italian laws guarantee that this is a wine from this specific territory made by tradition with it says uva frappato, with the grape named Frappato, okay? And they're guaranteeing that everything in this bottle is going to be from that region, made from that grape in 2012. Below that, you have, it's a 750 milliliter bottle. I've never understood why they made bottles of wine 750. There always seems to be a glass missing. And the lot number is next to it. And then this is fairly important. This is very important to me, a 13% alcohol by volume. California wines, for various reasons, I won't get into it right now, it's another show, tend to go for a red wine, 14, 14.5, 15% alcohol. And you say, well, what's that, a 0.5%, 1% more alcohol? Believe me, you'll feel it. And we can talk about that at another time. So then below that, it says it contains sulfites, which is not to be alarmed by, because 99% of all the wines in the world contain sulfites. It kills off bacteria. There's not a lot of it in there. I mean, it's just a minuscule amount. And the rare person who is allergic to sulfites probably wouldn't even notice it in a red wine like this. But they say, for legal purposes, it does contain sulfites. Okay, so that's Italia.
Viva Italia.
So the most difficult of all, and one of the difficulties is that I think that, if not most, but many Americans can probably figure out some of those things in French, grand class and bouteille. Oh, I took high school French. That means bottle, or in Italian. But German is difficult. It's very difficult. What we call butterfly, and what the French call papillon, and what the Italians call farfalle, the Germans call Schmetterling. Schmetterling. Darling little Schmetterling. So it's a funny language that way. And you see that in very, very much here. You have Bernkassler, Bachstub, Riesling, Cabernet, Dr. Tannische Weingut, Dr. Tannische Erben, Tannische Gefühle, Deutsche Pratikast, Bernkassel, ins Funste, the Mosel, the Fisch, and so it goes. It's like Sid Caesar doing a routine on Germans. And this isn't one of the worst ones, but there's a lot of information here. and you have to get a little savvy. Read a couple of pages of a book or listen to this listen to this broadcast over and over again. And so let's get to the top. Bernkastel Bad Stub. Bernkastel is the village where this is made, which is in the Mosel region, Mosel Valley of Germany. The other big region is the Rhine and the Ruhr. And this comes from Bernkastel, which is a little pretty village, which if you get on one of those Viking cruises, they slowly go by Bernkastel Bad Stub. You see this pretty little village on the hillsides, and the people in dirndl skirts wave at you and so forth. And so Bad Stub means vineyard. Okay, so this is the village of Bad Stub, vineyard there. Riesling is the grape, which is the most widespread white grape used in Germany. Cabinet is what they call predikat. It's a indication of quality and also an indication of the amount of residual sugar. Now, a lot of the very finest German wines, which people don't drink that much of anymore, are very, very sweet, intensely sweet, which comes from a process I can talk to you about some other time. And they cost a lot of money, and they are enjoyed for them. But there has been a tendency to make their wines drier and drier, which is called trocken, which means dry in German. Cabinet is a quality. It's the lowest of the qualities of German wines, but still an indication that this is not plunk from anywhere. So it does have, it's like an appellation of quality. 2010 is the vintage, and that, under that you have the maker, the owner of the estate, Dr. Tanisch. Okay, and that may or may not be. That probably is the town of Bernkastel there in the photograph. Sometimes some chateaus they literally just buy a picture of an old drawing of a chateau and stick it on the label and call it whatever they want. So it's a winery, Weingut of Dr. Tanischer, and it's estate bottles, which is that lovely word, gut Subfüllung. That means it's estate bottled right there. Deutsche Prädikate, it's German, all right? And they say, just in case you don't know, it's a produce of Germany. And then, as I said, the Mosel is the region, and there's the alcohol content, which you see as 9%. The last wine we looked at, the Italian wine, was 13%. Which is a red wine, but 9% is indicative of a wine that drinks very, very easily and goes down very, very easily because there's not that much alcohol in it. And you can really enjoy it as an aperitif. You can enjoy it with fish or just about any one thing you want, except maybe a sirloin steak or a hamburger. So that's these often tough German, and when you get up to in the Pradikat, that recently that cabinet, they go up from there from cabinet to Spätlese, Auslese, then it goes Beerenauslese and Grossen Beerenauslese and Granden Beerenauslese and Eiswein. It just gets a little crazy. So, which is why German wines don't sell that much anymore. Now, one last thing. Let's say you have bought a wine with considerable amount of money, $75, $100, $1,000 for the Romani Conti. And even though all that label says is what's in there is what we say it is, and has all of those appellations and so forth, and put in the bottle here, that's only a paper label. And it can be counterfeited and has only for very expensive wines like Romani Conti or Chateau Margaux. But it has been counterfeited, not least in China. I once met a Burgundian woman, a woman who owns an estate in Burgundy. And I asked about that. She says, I just got back from China in Hong Kong at an art fair there, and they had my wine there, but we don't ship to China. And they had as much of it as you want, cases upon cases. So it was a fake. Now, how do you know? How does little you and me and people get a know? Okay, well, you can't exactly do this in the wine store, but you can do it when you get home and then rush back to the wine store. Do you have the picture of the corks?
Yep.
Okay.
I see them all.
Yeah. So see, the corks are all stamped. Chateau Mabouze, Léoville Baton, Pauillac, so forth and so on. That is going to be done by the winery. That would be almost impossible to do. In addition to the label and stick into a winery, and not only that, but these corks will indicate. See that number there, 2004, and there are often other numbers on it. The winery itself, back in France, will be able to tell you if this is their wine or not from those corks. So I'm not saying this is ever going to happen to you, but if you go to an auction, you can bet that, or you can hope that the auction wine expert at Sotheby's or Christie's or something like that knows his stuff and knows the provenance. But even then, even there have been some whole-scale scams. Not so much by Sotheby's and Christie's, but their experts have been scammed too. And the only way to know it is to take the cork out of the bottle and look at the cork.
John, this has been very enlightening. I appreciate it. Of course, Art, who usually drinks out of a bottle in a brown bag, he may not appreciate it the same
I
degree.
no longer need the bag now that I'm quarantined.
That's right.
By the way, I have to say that before John, you talked about the labels, especially the German label. I would have been able to say like Schultz, I know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, now I could say I know something. Thank you,
Well,
John.
don't you remember Liebfrau milk, and equine, and maiden's milk.
So, John, as always, you have touched on a couple of things which I would love to do in a future video. The alcohol content you mentioned, when 9% goes down a little easier, more like a table wine than, let's say, 13 or 15%. Things like that we should follow up on in
Alcohol is
future
a big
videos.
subject. It's a big bugbear with me, and it is often totally avoided by many of the wine magazines, and I'd be happy to talk about that and why it is important.
Great. Also, Art and I live in Southern California, and near us there are. I can remember 30 years ago when we first moved to California, there were no wineries. They were out east in Murrieta, Art, and out that way. They were just dividing up the land, selling 20-acre lots. Today, those 20-acre lots are almost all wineries.
Yeah.
And I won't say they're mom and pop wineries, but some of the wines are really quite good in Southern California.
Western Southern California has some very, very Santa Barbara wines are some of the best in the state.
Yep. And having, shot in my career, having shot in all 50 states, I can tell you that I would guess that half of our states have wonderful wineries. I think particularly of Oregon and Washington. But New York wines are fabulous. I can't tell you about Florida, but there are so many states that have good wineries. We should talk about that as well sometime.
Yep.
Anytime you want to, I'll be here.
Okay.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, while people are in between watching episodes of John Mariani speaking to the Celebrating Act 2 audience, they can go to johnmariani.com and look at the hundreds of articles in his archives.
As well as these days, I have been serializing my novel called Love and Pizza, which I think people will enjoy.
When you say serializing, are they podcasts at this point on your?
No, each week there's a chapter. I think people can still read. I don't have to read it to them. Each week there's a chapter.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. So they can find that on your website as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
The Virtual Gourmet, johnmariani.com/virtual gourmet.
Over and out.
Great. Thanks again, John.
For more on Celebrating Act 2, visit our webpage, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tell your friends. Celebrating Act 2 is the user manual for the second half of your life.